All right, same day, just later in it. So same shirt. But I have also finished reading Alexander Pope's *The Rape of the Lock*. Um, I'm not sure how I'm going to title this when I place this on to the internet. Um, because I assume that one word will get immediately flagged. And then, yeah, yeah. But, anyways, um, this, I mean, it's thick. I did not read all of this. The canto itself is like 50 pages long, or the poem itself is like 50 pages long. And then I read a good amount of some cultural and historical background around it. But certainly not this entire thing, because I said it before, at least more recently, of that my no longer am I super interested in reading all of this and reading all these essays that are attached to pieces, right? Because this project in itself is an exploration in giving my thoughts immediately after I've read a piece, right? And given my specific background and who I am and all that stuff, right? So yeah, um, yeah. So The Rape of the Lock. It is a comedy, right? And the basic plot of it is that a young woman who is in some sort of higher position, right, whether that be presumably royalty, is goes to a party, a masquerade party, and has a lock of her hair cut off by a suitor, and then effectively a war breaks out over this lock of hair. Right, and it's intended to be comedic, of that, oh, this is absurd, this is wild, why are we making such a big fuss over something so small? But it's also a great deal of commentary over Alexander Pope's time in life, and I guess just the general fixation and focus on the England constantly transforming into this world powerhouse and imperialistic powerhouse, that views ownership and control over things much more important than the people that they're dealing with, right? It is also very important to note that a lot of this poem takes items from and is a satirization of Alexander Pope's one of his other famous works, which is his translation of the Iliad. Because one of the big things that's constantly occurring here is that there's this beautiful, consistent analogy that is occurring, in which Alexander Pope is constantly comparing what women do to get ready and to present themselves to the outside world in the effect of warfare and preparing armies, right? The donning of the armor and sheathing the sword and all of these wonderful bits. He analogizes them to women preparing to be presented to the world, right? And it is this kind of, it's this joke, but it's also this very truthful thing of like, it is the cultural obsession for perfection, or that you must look fantastic at every second, every time. And so you may as well be going to war, because you, instead of going to war with another country over economic advantages and power and control, you're going to war over ownership of a single person, right? Which is fascinating, and it's wild to see it posted in this way. You get a lot of great plays on words within that. Garters being both the strip of cloth that holds stockings up, but then also garters referring to the rank of military men, right? Is that the garter is the like the strip that I believe holds medals, right? I believe that's what that terminology is. War trophies and then things like that, right? And the analogy of conquest, which still gets used to this day. So yeah, all very wonderful, all very beautiful, all very funny. And then we get into the actual taking of the lock, which is, what is the lock itself, right? Because in the absurd fashion, right, and what kind of gets drawn on is that it is simply just a lock of hair. And what is the fuss entirely over this lock of hair, and who cares about it? Whereas, what is if we've been analogizing everything up to this point, what is the analogy for the lock of hair? Well, in general, probably be considered an analogy for purity or virginity, right? And Alexander Pope is kind of poking fun at this, of where it is this wondrous thing of where we have taken something that matters so little and conveyed it to being one of the most important things in the world. But it's not really even about that thing. It's about ownership of that thing. That is what upsets. God, can I remember her name? It starts with a B. Starts with a B. Starts with a B, starts with a B, starts with a B, starts with a B. It's like Patrice, but it's not Patrice. It's like B-R something. I could have sworn it's in this first page. Belinda, that's the name I'm looking for. Belinda. What the fuck was I saying? But it's that's what the obsession of Belinda is, right? Is that it is the lock of hair gets forcefully taken from her, and it's her favorite lock of hair. She suffers through pain and effectively torture to get this lock of hair to look perfect, right? The actual curling irons, and the the things that she has to wear specifically to get this to look the way it does. And it is taken from her without her consent, right? And it is, and it's something that seems so trivial, right? But it is something that matters to her a great deal, and she wants to have. It's also very interesting of like how this kind of takes place, of where it is the first two cantos. The first canto is of Belinda and her getting ready. The second canto is of the man and him getting ready. And there's a lot of comparison between the two of them. That's where a lot of the puns come in and the jokes come in, comparing the makeup and cosmeticry to conquest and war and things like that. And then Canto 3 is this kind of is them playing a card game, and the card game gets written as if it was war, which is another one of these very, very fun things. And Belinda wins the card game, right? And it is in because that she wins or is so good at this card game that then the man takes the lock of hair from her, right? And you know, you can see this in comparison to if you're talking about specifically just this, of where because of the cultural artifact that virginity is, that you know the taking of it trumps anything else, right? And that's what we get into Canto 4, of where Belinda is basically disgraced, but not because she did anything wrong, because something happened to her, right? And then rumors spread about her because something that occurred to her, not something that she voluntarily joined into, right? And the you know, you can take from this issue of where it is a woman that's so good at something, and then the only recourse that the domineering faction usually has is to then take something that is a cultural artifact like virginity from them, to then lower them back down, because that cultural artifact has so much more importance in the societal view, right? So that would be one way to look at this. The other way to look at this would be through the economic point of view of where Alexander Pope is writing at this time, of where Emu is becoming this imperial faction and is domineering and controlling all of these minor areas. I shouldn't say minor areas, but all these areas of the world in which they are just destroying them, right? And you can make that connection there of where, you know, Belinda and the lock is in some way representative of the natural ways of life, other countries, things like that. And then the man is representative of England and just the taking what they want by force because of some small slight, right? Which is a thing that has occurred so many times throughout history, of where a small power is done to, or a small power gains some sort of very, very small advantage, and then the larger power that is hurt in that very, very small amount then does something massively drastic, right? And basically destroys that small country, that small power, over a small slight, right? And that's what, you know, occurs here. There's the small slight of the women winning the card game, and therefore the bigger power, the domineering faction in the man then takes and destroys her, right? Because it is not like, it is this very, very small thing of the lock of hair, but it socially destroys her, right? Then we get to Canto 5. And Canto 5 is right, this is where the war breaks out, of the actual war. But as it's described, a lot of it is like the use of flirtatiousness and sensuality to make the domineering faction kind of not necessarily do what the women want, but rather lead them to feel that they made that conclusion on their own, right? And it's this kind of deceptive warfare and things. And it is all of this over something so minuscule, right? You have the introduction of the character Clarissa, who is, I mean, really like the third named person in this entire poem. And as noted in a couple different places, Clarissa gets introduced in Canto 5 and a later edition of The Rape of the Lock to act much more as the setup for what the moral is of the poem, right? And it is very much this character that is like all of these issues over one small problem, right? And you know, it's you can then take the commentary in a few different ways, right? Of all of these big issues over something so small, right? Whether that be him making fun of Alexander Pope, making fun of women for seemingly being so upset over seemingly so small things, society and a very Christian society being upset over something like virginity, or you know, you could take this still in the economic viewpoint of England is taking over countries and dominating people and killing people for spices, for tea, for lead, for, right? And it's like this, it's, you know, you can view that commentary as a, like, this is, England is spending so much money and is destroying so many lives instead of taking care of its own country, right? This is, you know, still within a time of where there's massive poverty, massive amounts of sickness, and instead of working on those things and trying to find solutions to those things, they are colonizing massive parts of the world so that they can get trifles, right? So I think that's it. I think that's it for The Rape of the Lock. I don't know how I'm going to label this on YouTube. I don't even know if I'm going to actually be able to list this. It might just be an unlisted video forever. But yeah, that is Alexander Pope.